The last server drags a mop bucket to the back door of the century-old mansion and lets in the night. The closer breathes deep the Mishawaka breeze, cool, damp, a little river on the air, and then turns the deadbolt. Lights click off in a domino from bar to booths to foyer, until the old house is mostly darkness with a few safety bulbs burning like watchmen. The Hacienda on Lincoln Way East has been closed for hours, but the house that keeps the restaurant in its walls doesn't sleep. It only relaxes, and even then, only after the people leave. Floorboards stop bracing themselves, the banister loosens its grip. Somewhere above the dining room, the one with the heavy frames and the mirror that always seems to tilt itself, something settles in the attic like a held breath finally let go. Closing crew lore says you don't look at the upstairs window on your way out, because on a night like this one, the window likes to look back. In the kitchen, a compressor sighs and the fryer ticks as it cools. Stainless steel glows faintly and the stage is set for a nighttime drama that repeats whenever it feels like it. A faucet gives a lazy cough, one drop then another, even though every handle is shut tight. You tell yourself the pipes are old. You tell yourself lots of things in this building. The staircase is the part you do fast. The steps know exactly how much you weigh and how nervous you are. Halfway up, you catch that warm, stale hint of something, maybe cologne, maybe a cigar, maybe just a hint of antique dust burned sweet by an ancient bulb. The second floor is a maze of rooms that used to be bedrooms and aren't sure what they are now. Shadows keep their own schedules up here. You check the banquet door, locked. Another door, locked. The little landing outside the attic isn't on your list, but somehow you end up there anyway, chasing a cool draft that doesn't belong to another humid summer night. The attic door is shut, a simple latch that looks too small for the job of keeping the ghosts at bay. The latch twitches. You step closer. You're not trying to listen, not exactly, but the house speaks in thin sounds, thread on wood, a dress imagined, a footfall one room over when no rooms are left. Downstairs, the ice machine starts by itself. Someone said once that if you stand at the bottom of the back stairs and ask a question, any question at all, you'll get an answer, not in words, but in the way the lights behave. Superstition, you promised yourself. You also promised yourself you'd never ever try it. You try it. Is anyone here? The kitchen bulbs, the ones you were certain you switched off, bloom to half-life. Not bright, not fully on, just a hush of light, enough to silver the edges of the prep tables. Then they fade, as if someone upstairs pinched the filament between two fingers. You decide that's enough. You turn, step, descend. At the last stair, a voice rises the way heat does, more feeling than sound. And you can't tell if it's a woman's breath or the house sucking in another secret. Your key sticks in the lock. The faucet gives one last tap-tap. In the front hall, a picture frame straightens itself with the softest clink. You don't look at the window on your way out. You don't have to. It's already looking at you. Hello and welcome to A Bend in Time, presented by the History Museum in South Bend. I'm your host, Aaron Helman, and during this series we are going to dive into some of the spooky stories that you'll find around Mishawaka, from ghost stories to true crime to unbelievable myths, legends, and folklore. We will take a few historical liberties with the content of some of these stories because by nature, they're rooted in rumor and legend and not historical fact. But that doesn't mean we won't learn plenty of history along the way, and my goal is to help you learn something, stay entertained, and maybe scare you out of your socks while we're at it. During the course of this episode, you'll hear fictional advertisements for very real historical companies and products. We do that to help break up the podcast, provide some levity, to include just a little more history than we could otherwise, and to give you a sense of the time and place when and where all of this is happening. And now, With all that out of the way, we're headed east of South Bend to Bristol, Elkhart, and Mishawaka to tell some of the most irresistible ghost stories in the region, and we'll start with a night at the opera. Bristol sits east of South Bend, where the river slows and the storefronts lean in close like they've been talking to each other for 100 years. Right in the middle of Vistula Street is a block of Victorian brick with a sign that throws warm lights on cold sidewalks. That's the Opera House. It went up in 1897, back when you needed a place for traveling shows, lectures, and the kind of speeches that could stir a town. The Mosier brothers built it big for its time, dressed it with a proscenium arch, and let the river carry in the actors, politicians, and salesmen who needed a stage. Then movies came, and crowds went somewhere else. For decades, the building sagged. Then, in 1960, the Elkhart Civic Theater bought it and started dragging it back from the edge. Volunteers patching plaster, fixing seats, rewiring, repainting. They've never stopped. A century later, the Opera House still breathes because people keep breathing life into it. But theaters hold more than grease paint and dust. They hold ghosts. Ask anyone who works here after dark and they'll give you 3 names: Beth, Helen, Percy. Beth's the little girl. She's not in the playbill, but she's always here. Folks say she can be seen from the stage, standing just inside the wings at stage left. She peers out toward the house as if she's counting the seats or looking for someone she knows. No one's quite sure who she's waiting for. Maybe a mother who never came back. Maybe her own turn under the lights. And every so often, just when you've convinced yourself she's a shadow, she shifts her weight or tilts her head, and your heart skips the way it does when you realize you're not as alone as you thought. Helen's the matron. You don't so much see her as feel her. She's in the hush before the curtain, in the silence when the set change takes too long. She's not unkind, but she expects respect. Crew members have said they've been nudged when they've cut corners. One actress swore she felt a hand on her shoulder right before she missed her entrance. The hand didn't push, and it didn't pull. It just reminded her. Helen's theater runs on time, and she makes sure you know it. But most of all, there's Percy. Percival Hilbert. In the Depression, he lived in the basement of the theater with his wife and kids after they were evicted. Odd jobs bought him the right to stay. Maybe he loved the place. Maybe it was just the last roof that didn't turn him away. He didn't die here, but the story goes that he came back anyway, as if the theater was the closest thing to home he ever had. They say Percy's the one who moves tools, hides props, and fiddles with the breaker box. Some nights the lights cut out mid-rehearsal, and when they flick back on, a ladder's been moved, or a costume's been laid out where no one remembers leaving it. The veterans don't get rattled. They just mutter, "Percy's at it again," and go on with the run. These 3 have never had a curtain call, but they know the show as well as anyone. They linger in the wings, in the aisles, in the trap room under the stage. The Opera House doesn't shout its hauntings. It lets them live in the corners, in the gap between the queue and the line, in the quiet after the crowd leaves and the mop water goes gray. If you're going to meet Beth, Helen, or Percy, it won't be on a tour. It'll be after rehearsal, with just 2 crew left. One of them asking, "Did you feel that?" And the other saying, "Don't worry, that's just the theater."
This week, Saturday, September 20th, 1919, the management of the Bristol Opera House offers splendid entertainment with The Millionaire Pirate, starring Ruth Clifford and Monroe Salisbury. We'll have 2 shows at 8 and 9:30 p.m. Tell your neighbor. And now back to A Bend in Time, presented by the History Museum.
As we make the drive from Bristol back towards South Bend, we pass through Elkhart, a manufacturing city with a long history and plenty of ghost stories of its own. We don't have time, of course, to tell all of them. It's almost dinner time at Hacienda, but if we hurry, maybe we could remember just one. On the south side of town sits a complex of brick and timber known as the Old Bag Factory. These days it's all art studios, antique shops, and a coffee house that smells like cinnamon rolls. But 100 years ago it was strictly business, and the business was bags. The plant opened in 1896 as the Cosmo Buttermilk Soap Company, shipping its product by rail to customers all over the Midwest. That venture fizzled, and by 1910 the buildings were home to the Chicago-Detroit Bag Company. Here, workers turned out burlap sacks for grain, feed, and flour, the kind you'd see stacked in every mill and farm warehouse between here and Kansas. For most of the 20th century, it was the kind of place that ran on the rhythm of the whistle. First shift in, second shift out, foremen shouting over the clatter of sewing machines and the hiss of steam. The floors trembled with it. By the 1970s, demand for burlap was dying, and in 1982 the factory shut down. Artists moved in, patched the roof, painted the walls, and gave the old bones a new life. But they didn't drive everyone out. Ask around, and you'll hear about a woman in white. Why is it always a woman in white? Anyway, this one is drifting the upstairs hall as if she's late for a shift that hasn't started in 40 years. Some say she's a former worker killed in an accident with one of the giant sewing machines. Others think she was a bookkeeper who collapsed at her desk and simply kept reporting for duty. There are tales of footsteps pacing in empty rooms, of tools vanishing and reappearing where no one left them, of the smell of tobacco smoke curling in the air when no one's lit a cigarette. One shop owner swears she's heard the sound of fabric tearing in the dead of night, even when the bolts in her storeroom were untouched. And then there's the basement, cool even in August. It's a warren of storage rooms and shadowed corners. Tenants talk about cold spots that slide along the wall, keeping pace as you walk. One potter said she set a cup on a shelf and turned her back. When she looked again, the cup was gone. 2 weeks later, it was back on the same shelf, clean, as if someone had washed and returned it. The Old Bag Factory sells coffee now, not grain sacks. But if you linger after the shops close, the place still hums with the rhythm of sewing machines that haven't run in decades, the sound of a day's work that never really ended. If the ghosts will stir at the Bag Factory tonight, they're going to stir without us. That sound you're hearing is neither ghost nor monster. It's the rumbling of a hungry stomach. And I know just where to go. A place where the tortilla chips never stop coming, and where the modelos flow just as freely. Of course, none of this started out as a Mexican restaurant, but since the beginning, there was always plenty of beer. Long before the neon, the margaritas, and the chimichangas, this corner of Mishawaka was built on brewing. That story starts in 1853 when John Wagner opened a small brewery along the St. Joseph River. Adolph Kamm took it over in 1867, expanding the operation with his brother-in-law Nicholas Schellinger. Together they built a complex of towering brick buildings, brew house, malt house, ice house, stables, stitched together by the smell of hops and the hiss of steam. By the 1880s, the Kamm and Schellinger Brewery was shipping beer across the Midwest, turning out as many as 30,000 barrels a year. The brewery became a landmark in its own right, anchored by a 4-story brew house and a 262-foot smokestack that could be seen for miles. In town, it was a point of pride. Workers came from all over, the pay was steady, the beer was cold, and the river kept the ice house stocked through long summers. Prohibition hit in 1918, but it didn't kill the place. Kamm and Schellinger pivoted to soft drinks and kept the machinery running until the taps could flow again. Beer returned in the 1930s, and for a while the old brewery found its footing. But tastes changed, big national brands took over, and by 1951, the last keg rolled out the door. The building sat quiet for a while, still smelling faintly of malt and river air, until developers reimagined them in the 1970s as the 100 Center, a mix of shops, galleries, and restaurants. It was the kind of reinvention old industrial cities dream about. Before the grandeur of the University Park Mall, the 100 Center is where it was at. And in 1978, just across the lot from the old brew house, The stately brick mansion that proudly looks out upon Lincoln Way got its own reinvention. The rooms that once held polished wood and heavy drapes became dining rooms. The front hall turned into a bar, and the house that had watched over the brewery for decades became the very first Hacienda restaurant. But maybe not everything in the building was made new. Maybe there was something left over. And if you believe the stories, maybe there still is.
It's 1980, and the best place to go for dinner is the 100 Center. Whether it's margaritas and wet burritos at Hacienda or pizza and beer at the Rathskeller, the 100 Center has you and your family covered. And now get a deal on movie tickets at the Plitt Theater with purchase of any large pizza at the Rathskeller. And now back to A Bend in Time, presented by the History Museum.
Hacienda started in 1978, right here in this mansion at the 100 Center. A group of partners wanted a place where the food was bold, the drinks were cold, and the atmosphere never stopped buzzing. Mexican cuisine wasn't brand new to northern Indiana, but Hacienda made it a party. Long tables, endless baskets of chips, and margaritas that looked like they'd been poured for a giant. It worked. The idea spread across the region, but this building, the first one, has always been different. Because if you believe the stories, you're not just sharing a meal here. You're sharing the space with the dead. The most famous story is the maid in the attic. The story says she was young, working here back when this was a private home. She fell in love, became pregnant, and was shunned. With nowhere else to go, she hanged herself in the attic. Staff say she's still here. Sometimes you catch her in the upstairs window after closing, pale face framed by dark hair, just watching. Investigators have never found historical proof of her death, but they have captured strange EVP recordings in that attic. Then there's the story of the mansion's owner. In the whispered version, he was either grief-stricken over the maid or facing his own private ruin. One night, he went to the basement and shot himself. Again, there is no record to confirm any of this, but some employees swear you can still feel him down there. The basement air feels wrong. Shadows move in ways shadows shouldn't, and more than one dishwasher has said they've felt breathing on the back of their neck when they were alone. Not all the spirits are tied to the mansion itself. Paranormal teams think one belongs to a young man who fell from the old brewery tower just across the lot. During one investigation, a direct question about the accident got an EVP, a whispered yes, captured on tape. Some wonder if he's the one who roams between the buildings, keeping an eye on his old stomping grounds. And then there are the everyday hauntings. Doors upstairs slam on their own. Faucets turn themselves on in the kitchen. The ice machine kicks in when no one's nearby. Glasses over the bar have been seen swaying in perfect unison, though the air was still. One customer swore he saw legs in the men's room stall, but when the lights flicked on, the stall was empty. Some think these are just stories, built from creaks and coincidences in an old building. Others think the truth is simpler. The people who lived and worked here loved it, or hated it too much to leave. Maybe they wish they could be left in peace. But if you've ever been on the inside of a busy Hacienda restaurant, you know the vibe in there is anything but. And if you want to know for yourself, order another round. Wait until the dining room thins and the laughter fades. Listen for the creak on the stairs, the click of the attic latch, the slow turn of a faucet in the quiet. Just don't look too long at the upstairs window. You don't have to. It's already looking at you. Hey, thanks for joining us on A Bend in Time, presented by the History Museum in South Bend. There's more history waiting for you at historymuseumsb.org. I'm your host, Aaron Helman. The theme music is Whose Distance Is It Anyway by Neil Carmichael. Our final episode will return to some of South Bend's most notable and famous old homes. Tippecanoe Place, the Birdsell Mansion, and maybe the underground tunnels that run beneath all of them. I hope you'll tune in for that one next. Until then, keep learning new things, and remember, everything is fascinating as long as you stay curious.